Greetings, BookTube. I'm Michael Romeo, and I talk about books because that's my job, talking about books. At least here on BookTube it is, and I love doing it. That's why I do this stuff. And I'm so glad that there are people out there who want to listen to me talk about books, because there are not many people in my immediate life that like to listen to me talk about books. I can count my wife, and she may be the only one. That's about it. But anyway, it's a new month, and a new month means a new chapter in my 120 favorite books, and this is part 3. And just as a reminder for those who may not have seen the earlier episodes, I'm doing my 120 favorite books in no particular order, just that they're my favorite books, and I'm doing 10 a month for 1 year. 10 times 12, 120, right? And I may have some what do they call them, honorable mentions by the time it's over, but we'll see, because I still have to complete the list. My list only goes through, I don't know, like 90 something at this point. I still haven't written them all down, and I'm leaving room that I may get some new favorites between now and the end of doing this. I'm leaving a little room at the end of the list for those that crop up between now and next August. But anyway, today we're doing, on my list, books 21 through 30. And we've got 5 Pulitzer Prize winners. A book that was considered for the Pulitzer Prize but didn't quite make it. And then 3 other books they have their own distinction, the other 3. Okay, so starting with the 5 Pulitzer Prize winners. The first one I've got on here is The Shipping News by Annie Proulx. The Shipping News is an incredible story. I saw one of the rare times that I saw the movie before reading the book. And I saw the movie, and the movie was pretty good. It was okay. But it was one of those, I said, you know, the book that's behind this has got to be better, because there just seemed to be things that weren't said, parts of the story that weren't told in the movie, and that made the movie a little bit choppy, I guess. So I got the book, and I was absolutely right. The book was just phenomenal. Set in Newfoundland, did I say that right? In Canada, or off the coast of Canada? I'm not even sure of my geography there, but up there in Canada where it's cold. And it's this small community of people, and it focuses on a few main characters, all of whom have lovable quirks and are just trying to get through life. And Annie Proulx just makes the whole situation approachable. All these people are approachable is the best way to put it. And it's a book I'm going to read again. I haven't reread it yet, but it's definitely in my mind to reread it, because I did really enjoy it that much, and I want to spend some more time with these people and probably pick up on some of the nuances that I missed, because Annie Proulx is a multi-layered writer. She imbues her stories with lots of, I don't want to say symbolism, but stuff that is just not bluntly in your face. And if you read her stuff a second time, then you pick up on them, because you're not focusing on the main plot. So, Shipping News by Annie Proulx, highly recommend. The second of the Pulitzer Prize winners, another one that is just as good as Shipping News, is called Breathing Lessons by Ann Tyler. I totally loved this book. It's about a recently empty nest couple that is on their way to a wedding. A long distance, a drivable but long distance wedding. And just their discussions. I mean, the whole story, if I recall correctly, takes place in one day. It's their drive to the wedding, their time at the wedding, and their drive home from the wedding. And just the topics that they discuss, and assessing where their marriage is at this point, now that they're empty nesters. And again, characters that are just absolutely adorable. The woman in the couple is just she's amazing, and she's quirky, and she's you just want to hug her. Is all you want to do is just hug her, because she's that kind of character. And the husband is long suffering, and just the situations that they get into, and the things that they discuss are thoroughly enchanting. So again, a highly recommended book, Breathing Lessons by Ann Tyler. And then we have another Pulitzer Prize winner, Laughing Boy by Oliver Lafarge. Really touching story. It's a bit of a romance. It's set in Arizona, if I recall correctly. I read this a long time ago, but it's always stayed in my mind as one of my favorites. Set in Arizona among the Navajos, I think it is. And we got a young man who is striving to be very traditional in the tribal beliefs, who falls in love with a young woman who has been educated in the white man's schools. And there's, of course, conflict there. There would be. It is a touching story as they try to find their way through this, to try to navigate the issues that are between them. This book was written back in the 1930s. I don't know how the book would be received now if it was released. It would probably be, oh, here's another book by a dead white man writing about a culture he doesn't know much about and everything. But that being said, if it was received that way, it would be received that way. Whatever. The book, I found it totally enjoyable. And yes, I think it would have some issues now being released. And I just overlooked that because it is a product of its time, a product of its era. And the way that the author thinks is the way people thought back then, white people thought back then. So you need to look at it for that aspect of it as well, because that adds to the understanding of what some of the problems are that are encountered. Maybe not addressed in the way they would be addressed today, but yeah, I mean, whenever you're reading a book that's that old, that deals with racial situations, you have to stop and think how people thought back then. It may not have been right, but it was the way they thought back then, and it fed how the story was told. So that's my lecture for today, Laughing Boy. And then we have another Pulitzer Prize winner, A Bell for Adano by John Hersey. Bell for Adano is a delightful story. I was delighted when I found out it won the Pulitzer Prize. I read the book first before I started my Pulitzer Prize project, which is to read all the Pulitzer Prize fiction. And when I saw it was on the list, it was like, oh, of course, that needed to be on the list. Set in World War II in Italy. It's about how a group of American soldiers sent to protect this small village affect the lives of the natives, and how the natives affect the lives of the soldiers, and about the efforts to get a bell for the church at Adano, a bell for Adano. And the characters are wonderful. You can't help but love the characters, and the situations are great. There's some humor in it. For a Pulitzer Prize winner, it's a surprisingly light read. And yeah, I mean, that's the surprising part of it for me, is it was an incredibly light read, and it was a Pulitzer Prize winner. And you expect Pulitzer Prize winners to be very deep and thoughtful, and there is some of that in this book, but overall, it's a light, happy read. So there you go, Bell for Adano. And then the last of the Pulitzer Prize winners on today's list is The Cane Mutiny by Herman Wouk. Couldn't put it down. I picked up this book to read, not expecting to like it. but doing it as part of my Pulitzer Prize type my project. Saw it at a bookstore, recognized it as being on the list, and got it so I could knock it off the list. And I was so glad that at the time, just like now, where I work a job that allows me time to read. At the time that I read this book, I also had a job like that, and was just so grateful that I had a job that allowed me to just sit there and go through this page turner and basically get paid to read this book. It is an intense story about a mutiny on an American naval ship, because the commander of the ship is a Looney Tunes, an absolute Looney Tunes, and the crew of the ship basically want to save their hides and know that if they stay in under the command of this crazy person, that they're probably not going to live. So they form a mutiny, and of course they get court-martialed for it. And it's a great story. That's all I can say about it beyond that, without giving spoilers. But great story. And then the one that almost made the Pulitzer Prize. It was actually shortlisted for the Pulitzer Prize. The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. Oh, love this book. My sister-in-law was going for her degree, her master's, I think it was. I'm not sure which degree it was, but and she read it for an English class, and I was visiting. Me and my wife were visiting her one day, and she handed me the book. She said, "You got to read this. I know how much you love to read, and this is such a great book." And she was right. I couldn't put it down. The characters, while they're not lovable, are fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and the situations that they and how they get through them are as well fascinating. And you follow some of them. You follow the youngest ones into their adult life, and you see how the earlier part of the book, what happens in it, affects who they became as adults. And great story. It's basically about a missionary family from Georgia who goes to Africa to evangelize a small village. And then add that to what I said earlier about all the other stuff, and you get a very deep, thoughtful book. Then we have Catch-22. I think I've talked about Catch-22 before on this channel. It was a book that changed how I viewed the military and war, and I was brought up in one of the families that war was a heroic thing, and the military was something to be looked up to, something to be striven for if you were of that mind. And I read Catch-22 and I went, this is madness. This is absolute madness. War is not heroic. War is a terrible thing. And the people who fight it, mostly to be, especially the ones who do it with not knowing what they're getting into, I feel like I'm about to go down a very controversial bent here. So I think I'll probably just rein it in right now and just say that Catch-22 changed how I looked at war and the military. But it was a fascinating book. Some of it is hysterically funny in a very dark way, and some of it is very disturbing in the same dark way. So it's an interesting juxtaposition of thoughts. So Catch-22, not an easy book to read, but definitely worthwhile. Next up, we have Agony and the Ecstasy by Irving Stone. Agony and the Ecstasy, wonderful book about Michelangelo, and it starts when Michelangelo is very young and follows him through the stages of his career as the artist we know him to be now. It's got the de Medicis in it, it's got the popes in it, it's a wonderful historical novel. It just carries you through this era with this culture, and following a fascinating person. Next up, we have Captains and the Kings by Taylor Caldwell. I feel like I'm starting to repeat myself. A page turner. Of course, that's how they end up on my favorites list. They're page turners. Young Irish boy and his even younger sister were crossing the Atlantic in the 1800s looking for a new place to live. And they were crossing with their mother, their father having already made the journey to America. And the mother dies on the ship, and that leaves the young boy to care for his sister and find their way. They end up in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and just the tracks that their lives take is a great tale that Taylor Caldwell wove. This book is a chunker, okay? It is a thick book, but it's one that you just fly through because you just keep on reading until 4 o'clock in the morning, even if you have to get up at 6. You just keep reading and reading and reading, and you do get through it rather quickly for the size of the book. That's Captains and the Kings, Taylor Caldwell. And finally, because this list is random, we end on a completely different note, from Pulitzer Prize winners and historical fiction. And now we've got Psycho by Robert Bloch. Okay, I mean, 99% of us have seen the movie. My wife still hasn't seen it. She does not tolerate horror movies very well, and I'm very fine with her not watching them, because when she does watch them, she ends up waking up screaming in the middle of the night. And that's an uncomfortable feeling as well. So there are a few people who have not seen Psycho. The book is even better, okay? I've never met somebody who saw Psycho and said they didn't like it. It's Alfred Hitchcock's pinnacle as far as I'm concerned. But the book is better. The characters are more fully drawn. There's a few scenes that weren't in the movie that I felt aided the characters and moved the plot along a little better. And but it's got Norman Bates, Norman Bates' mother. It's got Marion. They're all there, and it is a fast read because Robert Bloch is one of these very what's the word I'm looking for? Concise writers. I don't think the man has the ability to write a chunker, because he keeps everything down to the bare bones. Not so much that you're reading a first draft, because it does flow and it does give you the whole story, but it's a lot of dialogue, and the narrative parts are kept to brevity. And but overall, it's a good book. It's a really good book, and it's one of my favorite horror stories, and it's made it onto this list. So that's books 21 to 30 for this month. And just like last month, I want to go on and do the next list, 31 to 40. Because I love doing this. This is fun. I love talking about my favorite books. It gets me excited. It makes me want to read more. So, in the comments down below, let me know. Have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? What are your favorite books? Does any of my books remind you of your favorite books? Anything like that. Anything related to this. Anything, even if it's unrelated. You just want to have a chat. Go ahead and put it in the comments. I'll chat. Next month, like I said, we'll be doing books 31 to 40. And I put this out there for a friend of mine that there is an Ed McBain on that part of the list. And there's some other really good books. Yeah, awesome. I love books. I love that they do what they do for us. And I love getting excited about books. So, on that note, we'll see you again soon. I've got some other content coming up that I'm going to record. And we'll see you again as the week goes on. Talk to you soon. Bye.